Figured this was appropriate for today. Hello friends, my name is Lauren and welcome back to my channel. So with the release of the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, the new Hunger Games prequel book coming out in 2 days, I wanted to reread the Hunger Games Trilogy so I can fully remember all the details of the story and how everything connects with that prequel. And currently while my thoughts towards the new book are rather negative just based on the concept itself and the information we've been given, after rereading these books, I am much more excited to jump back into the world of Panem and all it has to offer. I'm really excited today to be talking to you guys about these 3 books, as these 3 books have been some of my favorites for as long as I can remember. I gave each of these 3 books 5 out of 5 stars, which is honestly a big rarity as I've actually only had one 5-star book this read other than these 3 books, which is really exciting for me. I thoroughly enjoyed my time reading each of these books. I will jump into more details into each of these a little bit later in this video, but for now I'm going to keep it in the non-spoiler section. So before I jump into my real review of these books, for some reason if you have been, I don't know, living under a rock for like the past 10 years, let me tell you real quick what The Hunger Games is about. The Hunger Games is a futuristic dystopian story where we follow 16-year-old Katniss Everdeen in District 12, the poorest of all the districts. In this world there are 12 districts. Each of them are supposed to provide one certain thing to keep the country going, whether it's food, clothes, coal, etc. And so each of the districts are responsible for something specific to run the country, but more specifically the capital. The capital controls and runs everything and keeps the districts in line. So everyone that lives in the capital lives a life of a luxury, while everyone in the districts works really hard for every single thing they have. So 74 years before the first book takes place, there was a failed rebellion attempt against the capital, and ever since then, every single year they hold the Hunger Games, where one girl and one boy from each of the 12 districts is chosen between the ages of 12 and 18 to compete in the Hunger Games, which is essentially just a televised fight to the death. And this is a reminder from the capital to show people the hardships that were faced from the rebellion and also how the capital controls everyone still. And as you can probably guess, we follow Katniss Everdeen, who somehow, someway is the District 12 tribute for this year's 74th annual Hunger Games and her story. Strangely enough, this trilogy about children fighting to the death is the reason I'm here today, standing before you now giving you this review, because it is the series that got me into reading and got me to this point where I love reading as much as I do today. I received the trilogy, I think, Christmas 2014, and honestly, like now, as you can tell behind me, I've come to grow quite a love for reading very much. This time I reread the books is one of my many rereads I have done. The most recent reread I've done is of only the first book, which I reread in the summertime, but this is the first time I've ever read the trilogy back to back in like years. Normally when I read a series or a trilogy or reread an old favorite, I am quite nervous that my opinions and that my old favorites might not stay the same once I reread them, but I am very happy to say that this trilogy still, like I said, met all my expectations and more. 5 out of 5 stars to all of them. I have been wanting to film a Hunger Games review for the longest time because, like I said, it is one of my favorite book series ever. It's in my top 3 and it holds a very big significance to me because it's the series that got me into reading in the first place. And so as I was trying to organize my thoughts for this trilogy after finishing all the books, I was honestly having a hard time figuring out which book was my favorite. The first book, The Hunger Games itself, introduces everything perfectly. And watching the Hunger Games play out from Katniss's point of view is just so interesting, enjoyable, and just overall really well done. I think this light reflecting is kind of annoying, but oh well, okay. In Catching Fire, we see more of the world, the district's Panem as a whole, once the games have finished, and how their whole world was really impacted by the last games. And in Mockingjay, I'm not gonna say what this is about because this is no spoiler section, but trust me, a lot goes down. However, while I loved all of these books so much, I have come to this conclusion. For the first time ever, I don't have a favorite in a series, which is super weird because normally there's one book that shines or one book that kind of sucks. But in this case, like, I loved all of them basically equally. There's no way I can really describe why I liked each of the books so much without spoiling things, so I will leave off this non-spoiler section with these last words. If you have wanted to read the Hunger Games for a while, wanted to read something in the dystopian genre, or just wanted to start getting into that kind of stuff, whether it's like YA, fiction, fantasy stuff, and or in your early teens, or really any age though, I would strongly suggest you read the Hunger Games if you're looking for a book recommendation that kind of fits that stuff. I found it so much different than any of the other classic rebellion novels you read, just because, first off, it's just so well done, and honestly, Katniss, the main protagonist, is one of the best protagonists I've ever read. I can almost guarantee you something in this book will intrigue you, whether it's the protagonist Katniss, the story itself, the romance going on, the political aspect, which is one of my favorite things. I can almost imagine there'll be something in these books that you will enjoy. If you have any questions for me that like you don't want to be spoiled for, feel free to leave me a comment down below and I will happily answer any questions you have without spoilers. But as of right now, let us just dive into the good stuff, the nitty-gritty of the Hunger Games. So if you're watching right now, you either don't care about spoilers or you've read the books, whatever you want to do, thank you for being here. So first up, I am going to talk about the Hunger Games. I probably will end up talking about all 3 books most of the time when I am talking about specific books anyways, but I'm going to start off where it all started. I don't think I'm going to hold up these books because I realize they kind of reflect really annoyingly, so I'm just going to like put those down. So I honestly don't think there will ever be a time where I reread the Hunger Games and don't give it 5 stars, because I think honestly I've read this book maybe 7 times, more or less, and I've loved it so much each time I've read it. There's a lot of people that can't even reread their favorite books, and the fact that I've reread this book like so many times and I still love it, I think really says something about the book itself. Maybe it's a mix of nostalgic vibes, but honestly I just genuinely think it's a great, well-written story and speaks volumes with its messaging. Now, one of the biggest things that kind of stood out to me in the Hunger Games and why it's one of my favorites is because of Katniss. She has strong morals, great internal dialogue, and also just makes the best passive-aggressive comments, and it's just always so interesting to hear what she has to say. So one of the biggest reasons I love this trilogy is because of her, and how she never really wanted to be the symbol of the rebellion. All she wanted to do was save her sister, save herself, and protect the people she cared about since day one. And so many times throughout the first book, and especially the rest of the books, you can see her dealing with the struggles of things she never really wanted to happen, and how they impact her in her day-to-day life. Whether it's her trust issues, whether it's her sleep patterns, she has definitely struggled from things she never really wanted to happen. And I think in typical rebellion books that we see, a lot of those smaller struggles aren't really seen as much. But in this book, I think it does a really good job of showing how everything has really impacted her from the beginning to the end. I'm kind of jumping to the next books, but back to the first book. So one of the big things that I think people think about when they think of the Hunger Games is the romance, but specifically the love triangle between Katniss, Peeta, and Gale. And honestly, I loved the love triangle in the first book, mostly because there was a lack of a love triangle. And that's gonna sound weird, but I'll explain why. Katniss says many times in the books, and specifically the first book, that she doesn't want to get married and she doesn't want to have kids. So we already have from the beginning that there's not much romance going on. But once we get introduced to the idea of Peeta, there's not really a love triangle there, it's more just one single love interest. It's her own internal thoughts that kind of kick into the love triangle thing. She goes from not wanting to get married and having kids to suddenly having to love Peeta, and also therefore starting to think about Gale in that type of way too, even though she's never really felt anything for him other than just like a protective friend. I think all of those thoughts for her, especially since she never really wanted any of them, made it a lot more interesting for the reader to like uncover her feelings as she started to uncover them herself. In the arena specifically, I remember there was one instance where there was one kiss with Peeta, and that was the first time she wanted more. And that was the first instance where we really get a real look into her relationship, like romantically, because before then, of course she would want to keep Peeta alive if she could, because why would she want to kill him if she had the opportunity to keep him alive? Like, that's just a decent human thing to do. But I think that's the first time we see real romantic interest from her towards Peeta, and that's what really caught my interest again, because it felt real. Even though it was piled in with a lot of fake things, there was something in there that was real from the beginning. Whereas with Gale, she spent a lot of time being friends with him. There was nothing real romancy there. There was definitely a strong connection of friendship, but nothing more than that, I would say. She does think to herself that if like years went on, would she end up getting married to Gale? Would anything happen with that? But she never says in the moment how she really feels. It's all of, did people always think this was gonna happen? Did I think this was gonna happen? But there was never really any indication that she felt any of those things in the moment. However, with Peeta, like I said, her feelings start to really develop in Catching Fire, and especially Mockingjay. And I really liked how the reader gets to see her own emotions before she can really process them herself. Like Finnick says, when she was in the arena with him in Catching Fire, it was evident that she really wanted to protect him no matter what, especially when he died and came back to life. I'm kind of jumping ahead of myself again, but in the first book we also get introduced to so many different great characters. Haymitch, Effie, Cinna, Prim, Snow, Madge, I don't know, whatever her name was, her prep team, her mom, and just all the side characters I loved. I don't think that there was a single character that I disliked As a person, yes, but character for the story all added a lot of value and were really exciting to read about. So like I said, genuinely, I just think this book sets up everything so nicely. It's entertaining and gives you a relatively satisfying ending if you want to stop after the first book, but definitely makes you want to explore the world as it grows and the rebellion starts to ignite, if you want to say. So the reason I love Hunger Games so much is just because of how well it introduces everything, how amazing Katniss is, and how she narrates the story, and I think it just sets up everything really nicely, especially for the next books to move on to. And the reason I love Catching Fire so much is because this is where I think the real story starts, and especially where a lot of the political moves are starting to be made. Something I love about this trilogy is all of the politics, and it's something I haven't seen in books that I've read in a while, is such a strong focus on the politics of a country, or at least done well. But I think in this book, it's explained simply that anyone can understand it, and that's what I really liked about it, because you don't have to spend a lot of time putting all the pieces together. We spend about 2/3 of this book exploring the districts and how District 12 and the capital, and how the impacts of the last games with the Nightlock and everything have really impacted Katniss and the country as a whole. It's really cool to see because she never really wanted to be the face of any rebellion, but she's coming with the consequences of what she did, because no matter how she feels, she has always been subconsciously rebelling against the capital. Whether it's hunting in the woods when she knew it was illegal, her conversation with Gale, mocking the capital, and a lot of the moments in the games when she did things to rebel against the system, especially using the Nightlock berries at the end. And I think it's shown in this book quite a lot that she does not want to be a part of Snow's games anymore. Especially when Snow gives her the shake of his head and he's like, "You did not unify the districts." She felt free. She was like, "I can do what I want because I'm gonna die anyways now." So especially with that, you can totally see how she just does not care and is willing to rebel, which is why I also love her personality so much, because not only does she make some funny passive-aggressive comments, she's rebelling always and really staying true to her morals so much. She even kind of starts to agree to the rebellion when she talks with Gale about running away, and then she meets the two District 8 like runaway refugees, and she's really like, "I can't run away from this. This is bigger than myself." And that's especially when we start to see her character change from not wanting a rebellion to starting to understand what must be done. In the last third of the book, we go back into the arena itself for the Quarter Quell. Not only was the Quarter Quell idea really cool about being reaped from the existing victors, because that was just pretty cool itself, the arena itself was really, really cool, and we get introduced to Finnick, which is just a win in itself because he is amazing. There was lots of foreshadowing in this book, from the head game maker's Mockingjay watch to Katniss questioning why everyone was saving Peeta's life. All those details really led to an amazing twist ending with the iconic line, "Katniss, there is no District 12," which gets me every time I read this book. I think that's the perfect way to end because it just leaves you screaming and needing the next book. It answers so many questions but leaves so many questions unanswered, and I think it was a great way to end this book. And so finally, Mockingjay. The reason I loved this book, and it's tied for my favorite with the other three, is because it's the most political, and we also see Katniss for who she truly is, especially when things get rough. Katniss is the driving force of this book, and I honestly was surprised by how much I enjoyed rereading this one, because I think my idea of Mockingjay was a little bit tarnished from the movies, because I remember not loving them as much as the other movies. I'm gonna rewatch the movies soon just to revamp my memory, but I was really happy that I loved this book. And honestly, for a lot of the time reading it, I was considering making it my favorite, but you know, I just love them all so much, so they're all tied. One of the biggest things I think we can talk about in this book is almost the cultural difference because of District 13 and how it acts and how it just survives, because it's much different than Katniss's life in District 12, in the capital, in the arena. It's much different, and it's much different for almost every single character we meet in the story, which was really cool to read about because again, it just adds another cool political aspect to the book, which is something that I think the series is known for and I really, really enjoyed. Another key thing that was kind of crazy in this book was Peeta being hijacked. We already know that he was taken from the arena in the last book, but when he comes back to the District 13 and he's not the same, I think it took everyone aback, especially me the first time I read this. I was like, oh my god, they took sweet, wholesome Peeta and turned him into this. How is that even possible? Personally for me, every time he was rude to Katniss or had a meltdown, I was like, oh my god, Peeta, please come back to us. And then finally, in the epilogue of the book, or in the last 2 pages of the last chapter, we see him and Katniss start to get back into who they normally are, and especially once they get married and have kids, it's just such a nice ending, and honestly the best we could have hoped for, because so much of this book is chaotic energy, but the fact that there was some glimmer of hope in the end just is It's beautiful. A little bit back into the political stuff, I loved the propaganda they filmed in District 13 with Katniss and how it was like described to the reader, because I really felt I could visualize everything that was happening super well. There's a difference between watching a video and reading a book where they're describing a video, and so that was kind of cool. I love how she went into District 8, into District 2, and led the team in the Capitol. I think it was all really cool, and how they filmed everything. I just loved that aspect a lot because I think it mixed those two medias really well together. And of course, another big political thing is when she gets the chance to kill President Snow. The only thing that's really been keeping her going this entire book is that she is gonna kill President Snow. And who does she kill in the end? Coin. That has to take you aback. When we learned that it was really the rebels that killed off the Capitol children and Katniss' sister Prim, she lost it. She was like, that is it. That is it. I am done with all of these games. And so with two power-hungry presidents out of the way, Panem was finally able to be free. And one more point I want to make for this book is the love triangle. I think it seals it nicely in this book because I think, at least for me, it was clear that Katniss didn't love Gale as much as she loved Peeta. It's always been more of a friendship bond between them, no matter how Gale felt. That's just how they worked. And Katniss from the beginning never really felt anything for Gale. It was only when she thought of the what ifs. But with Peeta, especially when he gets hijacked back, and from those instances of like a lot of pain, you can really see how much she loves him a lot. No matter what small kisses her and Gale might have shared on a romance that might have been there, I think it's been clear from the beginning for me that it was always gonna be her and Peeta in the end. And yeah, that's a little bit into my thoughts of the Hunger Games. I know reviews are a little bit more exciting when you have like some bad things to talk about, but honestly, I love them so much. They're so good and will still be one of my favorites after this reread, no matter what. They're just so good. So there was a lot of positive vibes in this video. I mean, the content itself in these books isn't really that positive, but I'm happy I enjoyed these books a lot, and if you read them, I hope you have enjoyed them as well. That kind of wraps up my review, but like I said before, if you have any questions for me, want my opinion on anything, feel free to leave me a comment down below and I will happily answer because I love talking about these books. They mean so much to me and I just love them a lot, in case you haven't guessed that already. Anyways, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, and like I said, comment down below anything you really want to talk about with me because that would be awesome. And I'll see you all very soon in a new video. I'm gonna read the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes soon, which is gonna be hopefully as good as the rest of the Hunger Games books, and I will see you all very soon in a new video. So until then, bye.